Now, as we record this, Crystal Palace haven't appointed a replacement manager to Patrick Vieira. However, it's looking, we were just talking to Riley, weren't we, mate, just before this, I'm just looking at the betting odds. It looks like Roy Hodgson is going to get the job. That's how the markets are looking at the moment. He's 1-6 favourites to get the job. So I imagine by the time this goes onto YouTube that he's probably got the job. Now, the argument is, Riley, is the fact what we're seeing at Crystal Palace supporting David Sullivan? Is it making him go, well, I told you, this is the situation. If we get rid of David Moyes, who the bloody hell do we appoint? Because I've got to be honest, I'm not confident in the Hodgson appointment for Palace. I would not be thrilled with that. And I'm not having to go at Roy Hodgson for that. I'm just saying, one, he's getting on a bit. Two, he was sacked by them. And the fact he was sacked by them and the same players, a lot of the players are still going to be there. So they're going to see the guy that got sacked. And let's be honest, some of them might not like him. They're walking back through the door and going, oh, I'm going to try and keep you up. It doesn't exactly breathe life into a football club when you're bringing back someone that used to be there, in my opinion. So what's your feeling? Do you think that this kind of supports David Sullivan?
A little bit. I mean, this kind of screams to me when David Moyes was linked with the West Ham job after he got sacked and then Pellegrini got sacked.
Yeah.
And I remember, it was a Leicester game. I remember on the walk home looking at all the managers' odds and it was saying, David Moyes is going to go back to West Ham. And I was thinking, oh, yeah. And then, no, genuinely, he probably is going to go back to West Ham. And I was thinking to myself, what is the point of that? It just makes zero sense. The only thing I can liken it to as well this season is if Moyes did get sacked and we got like Sam Allardyce in. I mean, you can just imagine how much of a backward step that would be. I don't even know why Hodgson would take the job. I mean, what's the point in taking 12 games on when he's inevitably going to be on a short-term basis? There's no way they're going to offer to him a long-term basis. In between then, he's managed Watford, I think, and they've sacked him and gone for another 14 different managers. So it makes no sense to me. I honestly think it's just so backwards. I mean, I do get the whole thing of they've lost 11 games. So, inevitably you've lost.
Well, I don't know if they lost it. Obviously, they haven't won in 11 games.
Sorry, yeah. They're winless in they're winless in 12, but I think they haven't. They've got one in like 17 or something ridiculous.
Yeah,
like that.
Really poor. Yeah,
it is really poor. Don't get me wrong, but they've got some really winnable games coming up, and you think to yourself, I'd back Vieira in those games more than I'd back someone like Hodgson. I mean, Hodgson is a dangerous appointment, and as much as we've wanted David Moyes out this season, I think our channel and even the boys on the West Ham Way podcast have stayed pretty firm that if a suitable replacement for Moyes was to come into the picture, if someone like, Pochettino was to suggest that he wanted the West Ham job, a big manager like that, then we wouldn't let him go. But, you look at the other teams that we spoke about in the previous video that have gotten rid of their manager, Southampton, Bournemouth. I mean, have they really improved since they've lost? The only person I could think of in the bottom half of the table, who has really improved from losing their manager is Wolves, and I guess you can count Villa as well because I guess they were kind of around that point as well. But those are two European, big worthy candidates that they got in. So sometimes it is better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And the only manager that I think I would have been comfortable having in ahead of Moyes going into the last 10 games of the season is someone like Sean Dyche, to be honest with you. But obviously he's gone to Everton. So, whether it pays off or not, I guess we'll have to assess that at the end of the season. But for me, there's no real names that I would 1,000,000% trust in winning these games at the end of the season. You've got names like Carrick, Will Steele, Bielsa. Those for me would be, maybe next season sort of appointments. For me this season, there's never really been a standout manager where I think, right, get him in and get rid of Moyes. The only time I could think of is really Sean Dyche. And that's about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I do you know what though, mate? It's quite interesting to say this because everyone kind of has this. There's certainly a belief especially amongst fans, but also I think amongst clubs. Certainly, if you look at the likes of Watford and certain clubs that just seem to chop and change managers, they've got this ideology that if we change the manager, that sorts everything out. That will just sort it out. And we've certainly had that feeling this season with David Moyes, and that's been a big, strong argument to suggest that if we just change the manager now. One, we know West Ham's recruitment, how we operate. David Sullivan, we are a very old school operation at West Ham. There's nothing modern about us, but we've not got a very good scouting network. We haven't got a good scouting network for players, let alone bloody managers. We don't really seem to know. We are very, I don't know. We throw the net out everywhere, see what comes back. when it comes to managers, West Ham just tend to look at Premier League managers. That's all they look at. They've got to have Premier League experience. They've got to be experienced managers. We rarely ever go for younger managers. I think the only time I can remember us going for younger was like Bilic, who was possibly a little bit unproven. And, we'll give him a go. Most of the time, though, we go for Allardyce's, your Moyes, players that they can, if we were going to get rid of Moyes, it was going to be Benitez. It's always the old same. Now, it's quite interesting. The reason you were talking, I remembered I sent a message to X suggesting, which I got this from... The Athletic, and they did a survey of managerial changes and to suggest where during mid-season where that they ended up, and it's quite remarkable how many teams it did nothing for. Right, so I'm going to go for it quickly. Sean Dyche at Burnley, they sacked him. They sacked him. They were 18th. They finished at 18th. Jose Mourinho at Tottenham, they sacked him. They were 7th. They finished in 7th. We Wilder, they sacked him at Sheffield United in 20th, and they finished 20th. Same for Alan Pardew at West Brom. Same for who we got here? Martinez at Everton. They actually finished worst. Oh no, sorry, no, they improved. They sacked him. They were 12th and they finished 11th. But basically, even when they've improved, they're only in place by a point. Steve McLaren at Newcastle, they sacked him when they were 19th. When they finished the season, they were 18th. Gus Poyet, they finished 17th, finished 16th. But pretty much, there's no change. Nothing really ever happens. So I think it rarely works, actually. It's actually just to show you. Actually, managerial changes rarely work mid-season. Nothing. Because at the end of the day, you're stuck with the same bloody players. That's usually the problem. It's usually the issue is that. I mean, I do think Dyche will probably improve Everton slightly. But even when you're seeing improvements, it's probably only going to be one or two spaces. It's not going to be huge. But the argument is then, I mean, when you're seeing what's happening at Palace, I mean, I don't think it's a good appointment. Don't get me wrong. Hodgson's very experienced. He plays very basic old school football, which I actually quite admire sometimes. 2 fast wingers, cut the strikers, go for it. That's how he's going to try and set up and be difficult to try and beat. But it just shows you the market and how bad it is. And West Ham aren't a club that's going to go looking abroad and going, oh, yeah, we've seen this guy in Belgium or we've seen this guy in Argentina. He's great. He could lift West Ham. West Ham don't do that. So dare I say it, mate, this whole situation at Palace is really playing into Sullivan's hands because he could just say to West Ham fans, well, this would be us. This would be what we'd be doing. We'd be looking at the likes of Hodgson. We'd be looking at the likes of Benitez and these sort of, let's be honest, dinosaur managers desperately hoping it's going to make a change. And with that, mate, you kind of have to say, well, has he made the right decision? I mean, we don't know this. We have talked about this previously, but has he made the right decision on keeping David Moyes? Standing back from it now, and I know we're saying we could have changed him previously. Do you think now we are in a stronger position if you look at teams around us? If you look at the managers they've got, I mean, there might be a couple of times. I know you said you admire the Wolves manager, but do you think we've probably we're not in an actually terrible scenario with our manager and players?
But I think if we got someone like Unai Emery in, that for me, I think would have been a perfect appointment. I never even suggest his name because I just thought, why would he leave Villarreal Conference League for a team? More chance of coming to us than Villa. But he ended up going there, and I think they've got a really good project going on now over there. So I'm quite jealous about that. Lopetegui, I think, has improved Wolves, but not to the extent to where it was worth the risk of the appointment in the first place. But would they have got sacked under? Where they've got demoted to Bruno Lage? Potentially. I mean, they've had a big sort of boost, but currently the only managers that you could think would realistically have gone to West Ham are Sean Dyche, Marcelo Bielsa, maybe the West Brom manager, I guess, but I don't think really had a punt on it. Rafa Benitez, Hassan Hutel probably would have gone to West Ham as well. These aren't managers to me that are screaming that we're going to make the difference from going to 18th to where Villa are at the moment and kicking on to being safe from relegation. So for me, I think the only thing I do worry about is that I do think Moyes has kind of lost the dressing room and the confidence of the players. Regardless of what happens this season, I think he has to go. There's so many decent managers. Someone like Bielsa for Palace, I think is a massive improvement. I think it's a perfect fit for them. It's just about whether we'll be able to keep them up. But for them at the moment, scoring goals is a problem. You bring Bielsa in, he's going to get the running numbers up. I think he'd be a really exciting manager, but it almost seems like it's a bet you want to place next season as opposed to this season, just trying to focus on things like safety. So I guess looking back, maybe it's the right choice to have kept Moyes, considering the managers that have come and gone from clubs. The managers that are available now, the managers that realistically would have come to us. I know we sort of flirted with the idea of like Pochettino, or I mean, I think even Tuchel was mentioned at one point because West Ham fans are West Ham fans. But yeah, I think it probably is the right call, which is, makes me sick to my stomach even saying that.
No. Yeah,
he's been and how much of a critic I am of him. But unfortunately, there just doesn't seem to be a standout manager at the moment that you could sit there and say, well, if he'd have come in, we'd be here. That hasn't really happened this season, unfortunately. The only person I would have said 1,000,000% would have had that impact is Unai Emery. And I'm actually quite jealous that Villa do possess a manager that good. Next season, even someone like Graham Potter could potentially become available. So I think probably in hindsight, it was the right choice not to sack Moyes, but it would really be the wrong choice to keep him on next season.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can't. To be honest, mate, I think that's spot on. I think that you look at the market, you look at where things are shaping up with other football clubs and where they're sort of scrabbling around trying to get replacements and who they're bringing in, all these things. You do look at West Ham and think we'll probably have done the right thing in the short term, just because there is no one really out there that screams that they're going to, as you say, you don't look at and go, yeah, they'd get us flying apart from a Pochettino, but that's just not going to happen. Yeah, but when you look at it long term, I mean, I'd like to think this is Moyes' final season. But the thing is, if he keeps West Ham up and also obviously delivers glory, mate, who knows?